It's a big Noah's Ark story, preserving elements of mankind that are unique and irreplaceable. It was really interesting to me seeing the story not from the point of view of people that get saved or big scientists, but more like the working class, blue-collar heroes that have to make sure that humanity is preserved. Casting is always an interesting process. Really, you have an idea in your mind, but then what I really wanted to do and work with the producers was to kind of keep all the options open, because this show is really about these two characters.
Tráilers.
And it is important to find the right chemistry between them. Action!
When you have two characters that are pretty much having to carry almost the entire movie themselves, you know, you have to kind of make those pillars as strong as possible. And the idea of Norman and Jaimin, you know, working together was really interesting. And, you know, we knew pretty early on that they would, you know, work really well together.
Bauer was always the fun one to work out, because other films that have had these buddy components and that more aggressive but endearing buddy, that's kind of the template for Bauer.
He's interesting because you got to find these little moments where you show a soft side to him or a caring side to him, and they're not real obvious moments. They're kind of like how you watch people or how you listen to people or where you pay attention and, you know, where you give your attention and who you give it to in certain ways, rather than be just a friendly guy, because he's not really that guy. But there is something about him that is warm inside. He does have that, but he doesn't really want to talk about it. You know what I mean?
You seem to want to transpose civilization and care for civilization, and one of the caretakers, one of the guardians of civilization, seemed to obviously have a beef with the notion of having to save lives and care for those you know, sleepers. But obviously, you come to find out that the reason why he feels that way is because he ends up, you know, having to sacrifice his own family to just be here, just to save himself, I guess, in a way. And I think that notion sort of haunts him over time.
I think he sort of gives up. I mean, that's why he does what he does throughout the movie, you know? I mean, you can only eat dried chili so many times and play chess so many times and flip buttons and pull levers. And what he went through with his family, he let them all die. And that's got to be eating away at him forever and ever and ever. And, you know, like, what types of things does that guy dream about? It's got to be nightmare after nightmare after nightmare. So, yeah, I don't think he's very optimistic.
How's it feel knowing you're going to die out there, huh? Answer me!
Cartwright's, he's kind of the opposite in that he's very vulnerable. He's not as outgoing as Bauer all the time, and his vulnerabilities has actually kind of like made him not entirely delusional necessarily, but he's definitely feeling a little bit of cracking under the stress.
I've been a huge fan of Jaimin's for a very long time, and to be honest, I was shocked when I found out that he was interested. I was like, wait, we're gonna get to work with Jaimin Hansu? Like, that guy's been nominated for an Oscar. So that was pretty, it was a pretty big deal.
And he seemed like the perfect Cartwright, that is basically the embodiment of hope and sense of responsibility, and is the humanitarian side of the science that's keeping these people alive. Playing against Bauer, who's more the survival instinct, and really the fatality of what's happened to these custodians.
Rise the voice of consciousness here. The two dynamics that separate the two, you know, those two characters. Like, one is does not think much of the job, and the other one is very serious about it for one good reason. It's, his wife is in one of the sleep tanks.
What we see of Abby, other than at the very end, none of that is real. And so, like, everything that she does and says, it's not Abby doing it, it's Cartwright's memories or visions kind of filling in, you know, what would she do?
I think she keeps Cartwright sane in the situation. It's like the only thing that he has
to hold on to. And it was very tricky on how to approach her because on one hand, you don't know if at the beginning of the film if she's just a figment of his imagination. We didn't want to make her into a sort of ghost-like, flat character. We wanted to bring some life to her. So it's definitely a balance between not being a ghost that just sort of appears out of nowhere, but something like a person that sort of grounds him.
Be uneasy to try and figure out how you're going to play it. You're going to play it, oh, this is going on in your mind, or you're going to play it with, with the notion that, your wife is actually dead.
You're not alone, my love.
If real Abby were standing there, she might have a completely different opinion. So the Abby that we see, I think what's interesting is it's really Cartwright doing a little split personality thing so that he has this voice in his ear.
The only thing these characters have to hang on to is hope. They're isolated. They don't know if they're ever going to get out. They have this huge responsibility to take care of these sleepers, and they themselves don't even know if they're going to make it.
Anytime, these movies are more about character than they are about spectacle, those are always the ones that people respond to, and I think this movie is definitely more intently focused on character.
I feel like my job, once we've discussed the scene, is just to let them loose and be in the moment and connected to each other, and usually I just sit back and enjoy the movie like a member of the audience. My interest was to do a live-action film, but something that I could execute and something that I could potentially just do myself. That was the origin of the idea. Something that, because it's contained, can be shot on a budget with only 2 actors. Keep it really small and contained and create a sense of claustrophobia around these 2 characters. I kind of had this idea of a seed bank for people. There are real seed banks right now where we are storing away seeds that are kind of to be preserved in case of natural disaster. And I read about that, and I thought, what if people were put away in a seed bank? Who would be looking after them?
For longest time when we talked about the story, the apocalypse was not even secondary, tertiary. It was just like, we felt like so much had been done with post-apocalyptic stuff. We just kind of had to nod and say something horrible happened, and now these guys live underground. But the ambiguity was actually hanging people up. Like, wait, why are they down? What happened? And so like we kept filling in little bits and details about what happened, but we still didn't want that to be the focus.
We tried to conceive of ways to tell a bigger story, show little bits and pieces of what's happened in the past and what's happening out there. But then by focusing on these 2 characters and their lives and their story, the primary reason was so that the film could be achievable, shootable on a limited budget.
There's not a lot of different locations. It's a very enclosed, film. It has the cool spectacle stuff, and it has the cool twists and all that kind of great stuff. But I think, you really get to know Bauer and Cartwright.
My first impression was that, whoa,
Visita mi canal.
it only takes place between those 2. And then right away I thought, wow, that's going to be a hectic schedule. But at the same time I thought, wow, that would be cool. That's a cool human nature study, having 2 people, put 2 people in a place, in an environment that's extremely limiting their ability or their, dreams, and how do they evolve, and how do they cope with that?
It had elements that were sort of like 2001 Space Odyssey, and then it had elements of being trapped, certain places. I could see it visually. I just wanted, in my mind, I was thinking later on, I really wanted to play as claustrophobic as it feels when I read it.
I talked to Christian about his vision very early on, and the idea of, doing a rotary phone future to kind of make it a little bit more grounded, a little bit more realistic, not to go too heavy sci-fi with it.
We liked that aesthetic of an alternate future based on 80s and 70s technology, but we wanted to make it a contemporary story. So we found this fusion of like, it's today or it's near future, but these guys got put in a very, very old bunker. And that just makes it even worse for them, that they have just all this equipment that's super old, and it's these guys like just trying to patch together from dusty old machines and computers to preserve the human race.
It's not sleek. I think too often sci-fi movies get into this whole, you know, they want to make their sci-fi movies look like the Apple Store, which is very cool. I love going to the Apple Store. But I think that, you know, when you think about things practically, you know, especially life in a bunker like this with, you know, everyday people dealing with these kind of situations, it's not going to be so pretty.
I like the way that it's mixed high-tech with low-tech. I think it's a very interesting approach to it. And if something like this happened, you would grab whatever works and tape it together.
We've always wanted to instill a sense of low ceilings, underground bunker. Our set is supposed to be in a repurposed Cold War missile silo. What worked in our favor is that all of our sets are supposed to be encompassed in plastic, so we've been able to use plastic to shrink down all of our spaces. So we have these series of plastic tunnels that connect our facilities from an airlock to airlock. What is on the other side of the plastic is our concrete bunkers. And in order to trap the air within, we wrap everything in plastic. So again, this is our sort of modern sci-fi element against our Cold War concrete element.
This film consists of a lot of oneers, which is usually a single take, uncut, unbroken, which tells a story in one shot. They really appeal to me because I don't generally like seeing too many angles unnecessary to tell a story. So if we can find minimal angles or even one shot that can tell the story effectively and emotionally, I feel that's the best way to approach the shot and the scene.
We've got to keep moving. Now let's see if we can figure out where the hell you're going.
We're filming Cartwright, just wandering through these tunnels in the underground facility. There isn't many areas to light because this whole area has no power. So we're just basically using these crazy high-powered flashlights, using that as bounce and ambience. And he also has his hazmat suit, his lights, his helmet. So those are our main sources of lighting in the scene.
It's got to be a challenge for Norm, our DP, you know, to find the different angles in such a small space. But it helps us that we work in an environment that would be like what it would be like in the movie, you know. So, you know, if it was just a wall and you looked out to a room this big, it wouldn't feel as claustrophobic to us, you know. So I think it helps.
Normally, I want greatness from this one, yeah?
The director and I have devised a very specific cinematography movement or lack of movement style that runs through the film. It's very specific where things are calm at first, are extremely static, with almost no camera movement. And then we go through certain moments where things get a little more hectic. The style of the film has a progressive arc that carries with the characters and the conflict they have with each other.
And cut! Sweet. Okay, this is great. Circle this one, this is it. Okay, got it. I was really into the old-fashioned science fiction, the late 70s, 80s movies that seems like we're not doing anymore, or certainly not as many of that kind. Sort of like an elevated science fiction that also has a social commentary to it.
And so what Christian's brought to this project with, you know, trying to make it look more like an 80s, you know, sci-fi movie, I think is really great. You know, it's actually a much more realistic take on, you know, how the future could look.